Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Public Health Management series. Today, we're going to be talking about sleep. I am super, super excited. I love this area. I love this topic, and I've done some research on sleep and people experiencing homelessness. And so I think it lends really well to the topic of conversation that we're going to have later. And let's get going. So first, I want everyone to take a moment to check in with themselves. If you do need to pause this right here to think about these things, reflect on them, decide if you want to make changes or incorporate anything, this is the time to do that. So you're wanting to check in on your individualized plans, the goals that you created for yourself, how you're doing, maybe even reflect all the way back to the first session and think about how satisfied you are with these different areas of health and see if any of your changes have made an impact. Look at your trackers. Have you been keeping up? Is there something else you'd like to add or take off maybe? Thinking about the coping strategies, the relaxation strategies, the self-care we talked about the last couple sessions. And lastly, nutrition advice, anything that you were going to add or change to your plan based on last week's session. So again, this is a moment to remind you to check in with yourself on these items before we jump into a new topic. Then we will get right into sleep. So we'll go into sleep information and fun facts. We'll talk about a lot of sleep barriers, mostly as it relates to while incarcerated. And then we'll talk about sleep hygiene. I'll explain more on what that is, but that will be a big discussion point today. Lastly, you'll get your chance to create your own plan. So sleep deprivation is a public health epidemic. So over a third of our American population gets less than the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep, which it's actually kind of shocking. And it's actually why sleep deprivation is a public health epidemic, because of how important sleep is for our health in various ways. And I will be going over that in just a moment here. Some other facts, though, is that people that have been incarcerated and people with PTSD are more likely to have trouble with sleep as compared to individuals that haven't been incarcerated and individuals that do not have PTSD. And kind of as we discussed a couple sessions ago, trauma is linked to incarceration. And now you're seeing some more effects of what trauma could have on your health as it relates to sleep. 9 out of 10 people with PTSD suffer from insomnia. So insomnia is the difficulty with falling or staying asleep. It is the most common sleep disorder in the US. The main cause of insomnia is stress. And so it makes sense that 9 out of 10 people with PTSD have insomnia. So why is sleep important? So I think a lot of people will kind of brush sleep under the rug. It doesn't get what it deserves. People, there's those sayings that I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of thing. We're not gonna leave this presentation thinking that, feeling that, saying that anymore, because sleep is important to all of us. It literally refuels our brains and bodies so that we can function at our best during the day. Helps with things like memory, problem solving, creativity, socializing, paying attention. So even think about yourself and how you respond if you're not getting good sleep, if you're sleep deprived. How are you functioning? And not only functioning as far as like work related tasks, but how are you functioning in your relationships? How are you showing up for yourself and your ability to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, your kids, your friends, your partners, all of those things, even your pets. So I know for me, if I'm not getting enough sleep, my mood is very much altered. I'm really irritable and short with people. I'll be irritated no matter what anyone says, kind of thing. I'm also less motivated. So something that really helps me in my mental and physical health is exercise. And I do it every single morning. But if I'm super tired and I don't feel I've had enough sleep, I could be less motivated and even less likely to participate in exercise. But that's something that I need to regulate my mood. So if I'm not doing that, then that's going to make my mood even worse. So those are just some examples. And then as well as like that foggy brain feeling, I don't work well without sleep. So my brain, I can't really bring my brain to do the things that it normally can do if I'm sleep deprived. So again, taking a moment to kind of reflect on yourself and what sleep deprivation looks like for you. Then here it has this point of clearing the brain of toxins. So literally it's kind of like it washes our system while we sleep. And our brain gets literally cleansed. It's actually kind of fascinating and cool. And there's been over the last, I don't know, 10 or so years, more research about how that cleansing of the brain is so important for preventing a lot of health issues, including Alzheimer's. So if our brain is not being cleared and cleansed while we sleep, something that can accumulate is called amyloid plaques, and those plaques build up in your brain and have been linked to Alzheimer's. So sleep deprivation is now an indicator for Alzheimer's later in life. So just, one piece of research and one disease that I'm sure nobody wants to see any of their friends or family get, that is linked to sleep deprivation. Then over here, I do have this article that I wanted to show you guys. Yes, I did write it a few years ago, but it's called Sleep Deprivation, What's Occupational Therapy Have to Say? So as an occupational therapist, we look at somebody in many different ways. So looking at their whole person and their whole parts. So here I break down how sleep impacts us cognitively, physically, our sensory systems, psychological, physiological, and spiritual systems. So cognitively, we kind of already talked about that feeling of being groggy, forgetting things. And actually, there's some research that shows how much money America actually loses in productivity due to insufficient sleep in America. So right here it says $411 billion a year. Physical impact, our motor skills are less sharp. We're slower to respond. That could affect, a number of things, from driving, which there are a large increase in motor vehicle accidents actually the day after we lose that hour for our daylight savings times. And that was a big study that also happened a few years back. Sensory impact. So our sensory systems are just less sharp as well. So impaired sensory perceptions, visual disturbances, altered pain responses. We're not as quick to respond to verbal or auditory stimuli. And then there are more auto accidents and workplace injuries when sleep deprived. Then we're looking at psychological. So more than half of insomnia cases are related to depression, anxiety, or psychological distress. Mental illness has a link to poor sleep and vice versa. So if we're not sleeping well, it will decrease our mental health, and a decreased mental health can decrease our sleep quality. So it can become a vicious cycle. The really wild fact that I found during this research is that sleep problems alone can decrease effectiveness of intervention for mental health. So you could be doing all the things, reading all the self-help books, going to therapy, trying to focus on your mental health, but it could be not improving solely because you are sleep deprived and you're not getting good sleep. Even if you're taking medications for mental health, this is a really big issue, sleep with mental health. Spiritual impact. Some studies found correlations between creativity while we sleep. And so there's notions to say that without good sleep or dream sleep, which we'll talk about here soon, we're missing out on some of that spiritual inspiration or creativity. And lastly, the physiological impact. There's so much. So our immune system has 4 main components that lead to our health, including sleep, exercise, stress, and nutrition. So sleep is one of our main factors here for health and immune system, but also just a basic human need, right? But it's also further linked. So if you are sleep deprived, it says here that further linked to conditions like stroke, COPD, asthma, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, depression, anxiety, substance use, just to name a few, right? So there's a lot of impacts of poor sleep. And so I just wanted to pop over there to show you guys that before we dive a little bit deeper. Okay, so I talked a little bit about how if you have PTSD, it's more difficult to sleep. I want to talk a little bit more about the how and why. And so if you have PTSD, you have a higher level of a stress hormone called norepinephrine in your body at all times. And this hormone just makes you feel like hyper aroused, a need to stay vigilant. So that alone, knowing that information alone, it makes sense why it would be harder for you to sleep if your body is reactive that way, that you feel like you have to be on alert all of the time, right? So it's harder to get into a deeper sleep. You're usually more in that light sleep stage. But even if you can get to that deeper state, there are still some issues with PTSD. So with PTSD, the other piece is that your stress hormones are live and high often. And then if you recall the traumatic memory, your brain feels as though, and your body feels as though you're going through it all over again. So those emotions are just as strong as when it happened. There's an issue with the emotional processing there. So you're not in that moment in time, but you can feel like you are. So again, an issue with emotional processing. Well, REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep, which is also known as dream sleep, it is good for our emotional processing. It actually is the state of sleep where not only are our muscles shut down, we're essentially paralyzed, so we're not moving, but our stress hormones shut down. So that allows our brain to safely replay some difficult emotions in a space where stress hormones are lower, we can't physically act out, and that way it might take off that kind of sharp edge on that emotional memory, event, whatever it might be. However, with PTSD, you spend less time in REM, just like I was talking about, because that higher level of stress hormones in your body. But even if you can get to REM, it is pretty common for people with PTSD to have repetitive nightmares. So with this, because it's thought that because your norepinephrine is so high, your stress hormones are so high, even if, getting into that state of REM can shut down, there's still so much left in your body that if your brain tries to replay a memory, you're still experiencing it with a high emotional response and a pretty reactive response. And then your brain sees that as a failed attempt to work through that memory, or failed attempt to process that memory. And so it tries again, and then it fails, and then it tries again, and then it fails, because the stress hormones are too high, and there's an issue with that emotional processing part in your brain, mostly due to these types of hormones and other things. Usually, with REM sleep, we can get to that state again where it kind of softens the edges for some difficult emotions. I'm sure everybody can relate to a time that they can remember, dreaming about something similar to what they've been experiencing in their real life, and like sometimes even coming to a resolution, solving problems in their sleep, or even just feeling a little lighter. So REM sleep is often, in this book that I read, it's actually pretty amazing. If you guys are interested in learning more about sleep, Matthew Walker is kind of like a sleep genius, but he's a sleep scientist, and his book is called Why We Sleep, but he refers to it as overnight therapy. And again, we're talking about REM sleep, so he refers to REM as overnight therapy because it's literally helping us through emotional times. So here where I'm showing that if you have PTSD, there's less time in REM and also higher levels of that stress, and it leads to those repetitive nightmares. Because of this, I did want to include something that's called the nightmare protocol. So I'm going to switch screens. And so inside the resources for today on the website, let me just pop over there. The first thing that you'll see is this insomnia sheet. So this is just information on insomnia. We talked just briefly about that. So there's more there, but here's the nightmare protocol. I would recommend going through this with a therapist because it can definitely be pretty triggering. And if you don't have a therapist, I would recommend getting one, especially if you're prepared to work through some PTSD related symptoms. And so again, this is in here, but I do want you to hear me say that I would recommend doing this with somebody. But it's basically rewriting the ending of the nightmare in order to recreate the memory or reinvent the memory. So now I want to talk about sleep medicine. So sleep, as far as, yes, medication, but other things I mean by sleep medicine. So not only did I just talk to you guys about REM, aka sleep therapy or overnight therapy, however, sleep medications, they might often be given if you go to your doctor and say you're having trouble sleeping. This is a common, response for your doctor to prescribe medication, but they're actually not recommended for the first line of defense. They're also not recommended for long-term use. They don't provide the same benefits as natural sleep. So with sleep medication, you might feel like you're getting better sleep because you're able to usually fall asleep quicker. And you might sleep hard. You might feel like you're sleeping throughout the night without waking up. You might think, wow, this is working really well. But you're not getting the benefits of sleep, some of them that we just talked about, especially with REM. Your body's not getting into those stages. So it's actually more like a sedative, like anesthesia. You're skipping over a lot of things and you're not getting good quality sleep. So again, it's only recommended if you've already tried a lot of different things, including seeking professional help, like seeking a therapist, making environmental and behavioral changes, which we'll talk about here in a minute, because it's called sleep hygiene. And you've already tried relaxation strategies, all these kinds of things, and it's still not working. And then this is kind of the backup. It's the last resort kind of thing. And this also includes melatonin. I put that in there because I've had questions about that. Melatonin is something that we naturally create in our bodies. However, especially with how society is these days, that can be really easily interrupted, as well as if you have, if you're taking other medications that might influence this, or you have certain diagnoses that could influence this even further. But even just the impact of having too much light and having too many electronics at night can trick our brains into thinking, oh, it's daytime, I should be awake. So melatonin normally will build up in your body and make you sleepier over time and sleepier towards the end of the day. But if your body doesn't have a good circadian rhythm, it doesn't really know when is night, when is day, that kind of thing, that can mess with that. So melatonin normally is suggested for just a small, short period of time, just kind of kickstart your circadian rhythm back into a normal pattern, and then you're supposed to get off of it. And I'm going to talk more about that here in a minute as well. So first, we're going to talk a bit more about sleep barriers. What you see here on the screen is actually a model that we use as occupational therapists. It looks at the person, environment, and occupation, and then ultimately how that affects the occupational performance. So I'm going to break that down even further. So when we're in the person bubble, we're looking at our person factors. So what is influencing us here? So we're talking about sleep. So person factors could be PTSD. That's something that a person could have that could influence sleep. Also, if someone is very anxious, anxiety and depression are big contributors to poor sleep. And usually the more we worry about falling asleep, the harder it is to fall asleep, and then the worse that cycle becomes. So again, that anxiety really, really plays a big role in sleep disturbances. And then we see the environment. And so the environment impacts sleep very, very much again. And so here it has examples of sensory intrusions, quality of bedding, and roommates. So I told you guys that I did some research with people experiencing homelessness in this area. And then also I work with individuals who are incarcerated, individuals who have been incarcerated, and there are very similar environmental barriers to sleep that have been reported. So things like sleeping with people around you constantly, people that could be snoring, yelling, talking, that kind of thing. So the noise from roommates and everything around you, the lighting and how the lighting literally never turns off if you're incarcerated. And even if you're sleeping in a shelter, sometimes that's the case as well. Quality of the bedding, people talk about how they can feel it in their backs. It's a very thin cot or mat, and same with pillow. Just very poor bedding quality. And if you're not comfortable, it's going to be really hard to get good sleep, quality sleep. And if you fall asleep, you might wake up due to discomfort and pain. And then, so we talked about lighting, about sound, about physical comfort. The other thing with environment that I think is really big is safety. So if you don't feel safe, when you're going to sleep, you're going to have a difficult time sleeping. So sleep is an incredibly vulnerable activity. We're kind of like logging offline for the night, right? So if we're not safe in our environment, we're not going to be able to get that deep sleep and that REM sleep that we talked about. We're going to be more in that light sleep. Here's my little plug too at this point. If you guys have a Fitbit, I would recommend using the app to look at your sleep. If you don't have a Fitbit, I recommend getting one, because in the app, it will show you not only how much sleep you're getting as far as quantity, but it shows you quality breakdown. So it gives you a sleep score, so a quality number, up to 100. And then it also shows a breakdown of how much time you spent in REM, how much time you spent in deep sleep, and how much in light sleep. So I think that's a really cool way to see how are you actually sleeping, how much time are you spending in these areas, how much time are you actually getting of sleep. Because again, in the first screen, it is recommended for adults to get 7 to 9 hours of actual sleep. And I want to actually put this other information out there that there's something called a sleep window or sleep opportunity, where that's the amount of time that you're in bed, but that's not the actual number of hours that you're sleeping. So if I go to bed at 9 and I wake up at 5, you could be thinking, sorry, I had to do math. You could be thinking 9 to 5, that's 8 hours of sleep, right? No, not the case. It's actually closer to 7. So 8 hours is how much time that I spent actually in bed, but it is normal to wake up multiple times during the night, even if you don't remember it. It's normal to take a little bit of time to go to sleep, that kind of thing. So that's my sleep window is 8 hours, but realistically, I'm getting about an hour shorter than that. So realistically, on average, I get about 7 hours sleep, and my Fitbit can tell me that information as well. So keep that in mind when you're calculating your sleep quantity, which I'll have you do here in a minute. Last but not least, we're looking at occupation. Here, the occupation is sleep itself. So there are things that go into that. So sleep preparation. So what do we do before bed in order to help our sleep? And then also, what do we do during the day that might impact our sleep, either positively or negatively? And that will all add up to our sleep quality or occupational performance in this area. So here is where I'd like us to take a minute to assess our sleep. So I'm going to pop back over to the resource page to show you guys what you're going to fill out. While you're filling this out too, I would like you to think about what are the barriers to your sleep? Is there anything that I didn't mention that you would add or think about? Because it's really important to note what the issues are. I always include assessments in our sessions because I want us to all take time to reflect on our personal lives, what influences and impacts us, and identify some areas that we could adjust if it needs to be adjusted. So take time to think about that. Then you go back over to your resources and you're going to fill out this PSQI. This is a pretty popular sleep assessment. So you'll fill it out and it's I think 3 pages and then there are a couple pages of scoring. So it looks longer than it is, but most of this is just the scoring. And then I will have you join me back here when you're done. So this is the time to go ahead and pause your screen, come back when you're done. Okay, so now that we just took that assessment, if you have a score that is 5 or higher, that's indicative of poor sleep. And so if you have 5 or higher, again, assess what's going on, but also it's suggested that you speak to a healthcare professional, whether it's your doctor or your therapist or both. So again, 5 or more means poor sleep quality, and definitely need to take a look at that and probably speak with somebody about that. So we're going to talk more about sleep hygiene. So this is what I was kind of mentioning earlier as far as looking at our environmental and behavioral strategies that could impact our sleep either positively or negatively. So positive influences for environment for me is that I do have a comfortable bed. I keep it pretty cold in my environment, which helps me sleep, and it's pretty dark. Some environmental barriers are things that we talked about earlier, which is noisiness, lighting, uncomfortable bedding. Those are some examples. And same with behavioral strategies. These are things that we do during the day that influence sleep. So if you have a behavior of, you don't start thinking or reflecting on the day until your head hits the pillow. That's usually not going to help you sleep because your mind's going to be kind of racing on what happened during the day, that kind of thing. But if you have a different behavior of, okay, I am going to journal every day to just kind of brain dump and get that all out of my head so I don't spend the time laying down thinking and worrying. That might be an example of a positive behavior that could help sleep. I'm going to show you too on the next screen a list of more sleep hygiene tips that deal with the environment, making environmental adjustments as needed, as well as behavioral adjustments as needed. So again, these are things that you can do to improve your sleep. And this is what is recommended as the first line of defense by the Sleep Foundation, American Academy of Sleep Medicine. Again, medications are not what we should be using first. It's kind of a last resort. Sleep hygiene is the go-to. This is what we should be looking at. The difficulty with this is that we talked about habits. We know it's hard to change habits. Well, changing our environment is one thing that might be a one and done kind of thing, but changing behaviors is hard. That's part of changing a habit, changing behavior. And that could take some time. So people can naturally get frustrated by the lack or the slow pace of progress. And that might lead them to wanting to take medications before they really give sleep hygiene a good chance. So again, it's not going to happen overnight. You will have to try it for a little bit. Try it for at least a week and see if that thing is helping or making your sleep worse, and kind of make adjustments as you go. But again, these are the recommendations for better sleep. Keeping consistent wake and sleep times as much as possible, even on the weekends. So I know it's not 100% possible for everybody. But the closer you can do that, the more consistent you can have that, the better. That's actually like a really big one. It can be difficult for some people depending on your schedule, your balance, your life. But just making that one adjustment could mean the world of difference. Managing your stress. So we talked about relaxation strategies. I'm actually going to show you some more that we have in the resources for today. But last week, or a couple weeks ago, we did some things with self-care. We did progressive muscle relaxation. Here's some more breathing and imagery strategies. And then here's progressive muscle relaxation again. So there are some more tips in there if you will need that, but that is what they mean by managing stress. So doing things that are going to calm your stress down so you're able to get to sleep. The journaling thing is another good example, kind of the brain dump, like I was saying. If you're someone that starts, your brain starts to go wild once you lay down, it would be a good idea to get all that out on paper and out of your head. Next thing is getting sunlight during the day, if possible. So this is kind of something that was mentioned when I was talking about melatonin. So sunlight during the day is going to help your body stay on track by setting that internal clock, by telling your body this is daytime, that is nighttime when it's dark. So with this, getting sunlight during the day, it also comes with keeping it darker at night in your house, using less blue light. Blue light is on your electronics, like your phone, computer, TV, that kind of thing. So less light at night, and then more actual natural sunlight during the day if possible, even if it's just a quick, 5-minute walk. Another environmental change is keeping it cool and dark. I mentioned how my sleeping situation is cool and dark. Most researchers suggest a temperature around 65 degrees for optimal sleep. So we need to be cooler at night to sleep well. Another environmental change, as much as possible, eliminate light and noise. So however you need to do that, whether it's a sleep mask, whether it's earplugs, whether it's getting rid of something, whether sometimes it might be adding something. So I've had individuals that say, after being incarcerated for so long, they're used to the noise and it's actually more difficult for them falling asleep if there's no noise. So if that's the case for you, become aware of that and use the sound machine. Put on some nice, calm, relaxing noise, because some people actually benefit from that. You're used to that, your body's used to that, and that will help you stay calmer. A behavioral change is avoiding sleep for at least 2 hours before bed. So if you're digesting food, your body's not getting itself ready for sleep. It's busy digesting food. So that's why it's recommended 2 hours before bed, stop eating. Same kind of with drinking water, maybe, 1 to 2 hours before bed, try to stop drinking water so you don't have to get up to go to the bathroom too often. Another behavioral change goes with caffeine and alcohol consumption. So alcohol, it can just ruin sleep. It's the same thing as sleep medication where you might feel like, oh, it's really knocking me out, but you're not getting good sleep at all. It's disruptive sleep, bad quality sleep, that kind of thing. And then caffeine, it can stay in your body for up to 12 hours. So just being conscious of how caffeine affects your body and if you think it could be impacting your sleep. So trying not to have it in the afternoon or evening. Lastly, on this list is having your bed or your bedroom, ideally, for sleep and sex only. So reserving your bed just for those activities. You don't want to be watching TV in bed. You don't want to be working in bed, doing anything like that. And it's because it has your brain start to associate your bed with all of these wakeful activities, right? If you're watching TV, if you're working, if you're journaling, those kinds of things can start to associate your bed with wakefulness. And you want to associate your bed with sleepiness. So along with this, it's recommended that if you are tossing and turning in your bed when you're trying to sleep, you can't sleep, you're tossing and turning for over 20 minutes, it's recommended to get up, get out of bed, and go do something that will make you sleepy. Go read a book, preferably a boring book. Go, draw, something that will kind of calm you down, even if it's journaling. That's a good strategy. Not, don't use electronics or anything like that, but get yourself out of bed if it's been 20 minutes or more. Do something that will kind of slow you down and then return to bed when you're getting sleepy. So these are just some behavioral and environmental changes. Another good one that's not on here relates to scent. So finding calming scents like lavender or eucalyptus. They have sprays you can spray around your bed. I make a lavender spray that's literally water and lavender mixed up in a little spray bottle. You can spray it in your on your bedding, anywhere in the room, just to kind of calm yourself down. So that's another sleep hygiene tip. So with that information, I want us to take some time to actually practice. So we're going back over to our resource page, and here there is a list of some sleep hygiene tips, most of which we already went over. Another resource here is a sleep diary. This is an optional way to tap into your sleep even further. It's going to ask you lots of questions. You fill it out every day for a week, but it'll help increase your awareness on what's affecting your sleep if you're not totally sure yet. But this is what we're going to do right now. So page 15 and 16 of your resource page. So we're going to build our own sleep routine. What we do, this is our sleep menu. So we're going to go through and pick, this one says pick one of these. Okay, so we're going to look at daytime habits that can affect sleep. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. So we see exercising in the morning is good for sleep. We don't want to exercise too late in the day. Not drinking caffeine or smoking after these times, not napping after these times, bed only for sleep, and try relaxation or meditation during the day. So it gives a lot of examples of daytime activities or behaviors that we can do that can impact sleep. So you're going to go through, I will do it with you right now. You guys know that my focus, I'm trying to do meditation, so we're going to keep doing that. And I also do some yoga. Then we're going to go down to environment. Again, pick one thing that you can control if possible. So these are some things we talked about: quiet, dark, comfortable, cool. If there's anything else to add, like if you like that scent example I gave of using lavender, you can add that there. So you can just check it and then write whatever you feel. I'm just going to write lab. And then the last piece is you're going to pick two things that are bedtime habits. So we already have a daytime habit. We have an environmental thing that we can change. Now we're going to focus on nighttime habits. So here's some more tips. So getting on a sleep schedule, which we talked about, bed and wake and sleep at the same time every day, dimming lights, not eating large meals before bed, etc. And then some relaxation strategies to try right before bed. So check off two of those things. And then you're going to have, what is your sleep hygiene routine? So you're going to have 4 items, 1, 2, 3, 4 goes down to this page. And then below that is your way to track which ones you did each of those days, if you want to track. So in total, you did what out of what for the week. So again, this is a tracking mechanism that you'll use later this week. But for now, let's at least do this first page of identifying our own sleep hygiene routine. And once you're done with that, you can pop back over to the rest of the session. Okay, so now you guys should have your sleep hygiene routine, your plan for the session, or I'm sorry, for the week. And so the next steps are going to be implementing your sleep plan, your sleep routine. If you want to, if it's helpful for you, and if you're using the habit tracker, go ahead and add things to the tracker. If you want to add, like, okay, I want to track how often I'm doing PMR, progressive muscle relaxation before bed, or how much I am journaling. Go ahead and add it. And then you can also use that sleep diary I showed you in the resource page for more awareness onto what's affecting your sleep. Reminders going forward, just to think about your plan and your trackers, and think about, what you want to change or add, as we go on, and thinking about how to integrate previous education to improve sleep. So we did talk about habits quite a bit here in routines. So incorporating things into your routines, changing our habits, coping mechanisms like relaxation, and also nutrition. And then next week, we're going to be focusing on ergonomics and exercise. So I am, again, really happy to have been here through sleep. Let us know if you have any questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time.